let's dive right into this explainer. When we look at global geopolitics, it's incredibly easy to treat a massive nation like Russia as a single, unified monolith, just one giant block. But the truth, especially when you dig into the data we're unpacking today, is way more complicated. Right now, deep beneath the surface, there are immense structural fault lines loading up with pressure, region by region. Today we're going to explore how an unequal burden of war, a history of stripped autonomy, and one very specific looming power crisis in Chechnya under Ramzan Kadyrov could be the ultimate test for the entire federation's structural integrity.
75 times. Just let that sink in for a second. According to some pretty stark analyses of the current conflict, certain ethnic republics inside Russia are experiencing war fatality rates up to 75 times higher than Moscow's. The burden of this war is absolutely not being shared equally. It's heavily skewed toward ethnic minorities and the poorer regions situated far from the capital. And this incredible disparity in sacrifice, well, that's exactly the kind of arithmetic that historically breaks empires. But to really understand how we got here, we've got to look back at the foundation of the modern Russian Federation.
Part 1. A broken constitutional promise.
So, back in 1993, the Soviet Union had just collapsed, right? And a terrified Moscow made this grand promise to its ethnic republics to keep them from splintering off. The deal was, you can have your own constitution, your own language, even your own president, as long as you stay within the Federation. But fast forward through the last 30-odd years, and that autonomy has been systematically stripped away. By 2015, Bashkortostan was forced to give up the title of president for its leader. Tatarstan, which was literally the very last holdout, had to drop the title just recently in 2024. And that exact same year, direct mayoral elections in the regional centers of Buryatia and Yakutia were completely scrapped. So while federalism exists on paper, the actual direction of travel is moving aggressively toward intense, total centralization.
Which brings us to Part 2. Blood and diamonds.
The financial reality of all this centralization is a highly unequal exchange of blood and treasure. Basically, Moscow extracts the wealth from these resource-rich regions but provides zero federal relief when they struggle. Take Yakutia. Their diamond industry is massive. It generates roughly a third of the republic's entire budget. But here's the catch. Moscow controls the export and tax policy. So when Western sanctions forced a major Siberian mine to halt operations for 3 months, the federal government offered absolutely no relief to the region. Regional analysts in places like Buryatia report a very simple, stark truth. The wealth gets extracted, and any remaining regional money is funneled directly into the war effort.
And the really crucial point here is that the very regions that gave up their autonomy and their wealth are the ones doing the vast majority of the dying. The demographic data on this is solid. Look at Buryatia. Their war fatality rate is estimated to be anywhere from 3 to 27 times their actual share of the population. Then you have Tuva, which is recognized as the country's poorest republic. In a single month, Tuva recorded the absolute highest per capita death rate of any region in the entire country. In fact, 6 of Russia's 10 highest mortality regions are way out in Siberia and the Far East. It is a massive transfer of human life from the peripheries just to serve the goals of the center.
Exiled advocates are obviously watching this happen. One Buryat leader put it incredibly starkly, saying, indigenous peoples are needed for only one purpose: to die for the sake of the empire. When you combine that loss of local political control, the extraction of economic wealth, and a highly disproportionate death toll, you create this deep structural resentment. The social contract has just been fundamentally altered.
Part 3. The Chechen exception.
Now, while regions like Tatarstan and Yakutia were losing their autonomy, the Republic of Chechnya kept theirs. But, and this is key, they didn't keep it through constitutional law or institutional guarantees. They kept it through a highly fragile, personalized pact known as the Putin-Kadyrov bargain. The terms are surprisingly simple. Ramzan Kadyrov gets total local control and absolute impunity to run Chechnya however he sees fit. In exchange, Kadyrov pledges unflinching personal loyalty to Vladimir Putin and Moscow. It's a system built entirely on a handshake between two men, not on the stability of actual government institutions.
Which leads right into Part 4, Kadyrov's looming power crisis.
Multiple reports indicate that Ramzan Kadyrov is gravely ill, specifically suffering from kidney failure. Because the entire stability of Chechnya and, really, its relationship with Moscow relies solely on his personal rule, his declining health is accelerating a major succession crisis in Grozny. If he's no longer in power, that foundational bargain evaporates. Poof, gone. This is exactly why some geopolitical analysts are calling Chechnya Putin's second biggest headache after Ukraine itself. The potential for sudden, explosive instability here is just massive.
11 years. This single number represents an absolute logistical and legal nightmare for both Grozny and Moscow. and it exposes just how utterly unprepared the system is for a sudden change in leadership.
See, Kadyrov has clearly been grooming his 20-year-old son to eventually take over the republic. The problem? Chechen law strictly mandates that a leader cannot legally hold the top job until they're much older. There is literally an 11-year legal gap before his son is actually eligible to rule. Because of this, Moscow and Grozny are reportedly scrambling right now, trying to draft contingency plans for a succession timeline that simply doesn't hold up. If Kadyrov passes away soon, there is no clear legal successor ready to step in. A power vacuum in a heavily armed region like Chechnya, that's definitely one of the most dangerous scenarios imaginable for the Russian state right now.
So, part 5, the breaking point?
Outside the country, exiled leaders and organizers aren't just sitting around waiting to find out what happens, they are actively preparing for the fallout. We're seeing diaspora forums convening in Western capitals, places like Bucharest, Washington, and Bratislava. And these aren't just casual meetups. These are strategic sessions where advocacy groups are explicitly rehearsing for what comes next, with some even openly calling for Russia's dissolution into independent successor states. They see the disproportionate casualties and these looming crises as the beginning of the end. But hold on, we have to stay analytical here. Leading experts actually caution that immediate fragmentation is quite unlikely for a few key reasons. First off, ethnic Russians make up 81% of the total population today. That's a much higher concentration than during the fall of the Soviet Union. Second, Soviet-era borders were historically and deliberately drawn to prevent clean ethnic secession. The geography inherently works against it. And finally, there's currently no organized separatist movement operating inside the Russian majority regions. The structural conditions for a clean break simply aren't there today.
However, and this is the critical takeaway from all this source material, grievance doesn't need an organized movement to be real. While the structure holds today, the foundation is incredibly brittle. A massive, sudden shock, whether that's a dramatic shift in the ongoing war or, very likely, a botched succession in Chechnya, could act as the spark. It's a scenario where a localized crisis in Grozny forces Moscow to suddenly redirect resources, exposing the deep grievances in Buryatia, Tuva, and Yakutia all at once. The fault lines might be hidden, but they're absolutely loaded. So I'll leave you with this final thought to wrap up today's explainer. When a system's fault lines are loaded region by region, funeral by funeral, what happens when that final shock actually hits? We are watching a nation balance extreme centralization and disproportionate sacrifice on one side against the failing health of a single regional strongman on the other. How long can a fragile system withstand this kind of unequal pressure before it ultimately fractures? It's a situation we'll definitely be watching very, very closely. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive, and as always, keep questioning the structures beneath the surface.